Good morning, everyone.
Good morning, everyone.
How
For
are you
those of
this
you,
morning?
good. I was just about to say, for all those who are, enveloped in the heat dome, our sympathies are with you. We are enveloped in the heat dome here. I think this week is supposed to be the hottest week we've had.
Gosh,
It
I
looks like,
even read in like Italy, it's over 113 degrees, I think.
yeah, I saw
Fahrenheit.
that. I saw that.
It's
But
not.
and then I'm not. The thing about it is, I'm not really sure if we're really that much above normal, which is funny to say. I mean, we're like
Yeah.
102, and the problem is the humidity makes it feel like 106 or 110. So you go to the feels like when you look at your
Mhm.
thermometer on your phone and it goes feels like 110 because humidity is making it hotter. You're like, oh yeah, I noticed that. Thank
And
you.
just for the record, so everyone knows, we're in Houston, Texas.
Yeah, Houston, Texas, you can't really get much hotter than this. I think I've mentioned this before, but I used to have teams that were in India, different places in India, and they used to love to call me and they would say like, "Hey, in in Mumbai, it is now cooler in August than it is in Houston, Texas." And I'm like, "Yep. Yeah, it would be like hotter here than it would be in India sometimes during the summer, which is saying a lot."
That is, I think it's unusually hot. I think across the world right now it's unusually hot.
Yeah, it's a little toasty for sure, but
Yeah.
it's July. It gives you a reason to go out and jump in the lake and get in the pool, or as I said yesterday, buy a friend a popsicle or a
Yes.
ice cream. That sounds kind of weird. When it's not hot. Hey, Heather, I'll buy you a popsicle. But right now, you can kind of get away with that, saying, Heather, I'll buy you a popsicle. Oh yeah, that sounds awesome. So, I
Very.
throw that out to you. Bond with a peer or a coworker by buying them an ice cream or a popsicle.
That's a nice treat instead of a hot
Yeah,
coffee.
yeah,
Mhm.
exactly.
Well,
So
today
we're going to talk about
go ahead.
PIPs, performance improvement plans. And the reason why we're talking about this, and it sounds probably somewhat broad topic, is that I did a LinkedIn post about this topic about PIPs. And so there was an article, and the article was basically telling you what to do if you were on a PIP. And essentially, the article summarized, hey, look, if you're on a PIP, pretty much quit because they're going to try to fire you and you're not going to be around long. Did I summarize that correctly, Heather?
Yeah, that was spot on.
Okay. And so I read it and I was like, okay, that's very, I think, sound, if not boring advice. And we think we all get that if we get put on a PIP. We're probably not long for this world and the organization. So I included the article, and what I did is I put 8 ways to stay off of a PIP or to never get on a PIP
Mhm.
because I thought that was more important. Like, what do we care once we're in trouble? Like, shouldn't we have been doing things that will keep us from getting in trouble? And so I posted this
Yeah.
online, and I think now it's almost up to 50,000 views. So I was quite surprised that it had that many views. But obviously, it's a topic that people were interested in, and the checklist was motivating for them to take a look at. So we just figured we'd kick that around this morning and talk a little bit more about PIPs, etc. And gosh knows, I have a lot of experience not being on PIPs, but putting people on PIPs. So that's where the experience comes from.
Yeah, and for those of
Oh,
you that
maybe, yeah, I do have experience being on a PIP once, maybe, but that was really young, and I learned from that.
well, that's good. Hence why you have the recommendations after being on
Yes,
the
hence I'm a well-rounded expert on PIPs.
well, and for those of you that may not know, a PIP in human resources, there's different varieties of PIPs. PIP is personal improvement plan. I know there's an acronym for PIP for the safety um, industry. But a PIP is about performance, and I think it's interesting. And I think the article that you shared was from the former VP of HR of Microsoft, right, Jason?
Correct.
And he was talking about, hey, if you get to the point where you're on the PIP, you need to think about leaving. And I think that's why Jason said, hey, but let's look at the proactive approach of what should you do to avoid a PIP. And so, we put together some information that Jason had on just some statistics around PIPs. And I'd love, Jason, for you to kind of dive in to this and what it means. And then we can go into what employers and employees can do to avoid getting to a PIP.
Well, really, when you get on a PIP, and the checklist that I put together about how to stay off of a PIP was really centered around, most of the time, it's really just it's about bad communication. The majority of the times that an employee gets on a PIP is because there was poor communication between the manager and the employee. And sometimes that's employee having bad communication. Sometimes it's the manager having the bad communication. And so really, as an employee, it's up to you to ensure good communication. So a couple of things that I talked about were, one is, if communication is really not happening with your manager, you need to really make sure that it does. So, schedule the meetings, schedule your one-on-ones. If they're not happening, make sure that you propose them and you make them kept on your manager's calendar, and make sure that happens. And then when you go in and you have a conversation with your manager about your performance, ask them specifically, hey, Heather, if you had to rate me today, and whatever your rating system is, what would you rate me today? And have that ongoing, literally have that conversation. If you don't like it, to do it every week. I used to do it every week, and my manager would be like, dude, you're still the same thing that you were before, which is, the highest rating. So get out of my office. So, if you have that kind of relationship, great. But, sometimes, at least once a month, check in and say, hey, what's my rating? What do you think of me? How am I doing? And that's very helpful for you, because you know where you stand. I said, schedule the one-on-ones. One of the things that I didn't put in the checklist is that I always used to have a PowerPoint, and that would show the things that I completed, the things that I didn't complete, and I would review the things that we've talked about throughout the course of the year. And I would always leave them a copy and walk away with a copy, so we had a very complete record of the conversation. The other thing that we talked about, especially right now, is in the checklist, was be easy to manage. Nobody wants to deal with somebody who's really difficult to work with, to manage, to be a peer with. It's just not something that's going to help you. So I'm not saying, just be a pushover and lie down and don't advocate for the things that you think are right for the business. You need to do that. But if you do that in a respectful manner, that's really going to go far in terms of your value in the organization. Be trustworthy with everyone. That's a huge thing. A lot of PIPs happen, believe it or not, because the person is not viewed as trustworthy, in terms of they can't meet their commitments. They keep slipping on projects. The manager expects a project to be done in a certain period of time, and it's not done, and then they either never talk about it, or they forget to bring it up, or they aren't upfront with colleagues about things that are going to happen. And so trustworthiness is really a big deal. Be open and honest about what's going on, and if you can't do something, or you can't complete a deliverable, communicate that ahead of time. Make sure that those people that are depending on you are aware of it. And at the end of the day, we all work as a team, and so hopefully you're in an organization where if you need help, raise your hand, and people are going to rally to the cause to help you out. So I think those are really, really important. And then let's go back up to the top for employers. Set expectations early and often. Yeah, just be really clear about what you want. Employees want clarity. They want to know about how they're doing, what it takes to be successful. And, at the end of the day, we all hate to have hard conversations. People think hard conversations are bad, and they try to avoid conflict. I don't want to have that conversation. Oh, it's going to be terrible. Oh, I don't want to do it. But you know what? Most of the time when you have a conversation, it's not as bad as you think. And then the other thing is, hard conversations are really fair conversations. They're the most fair conversations you can have. And what I mean by that is, you really set expectations. People really understand where you're coming from, and they know what's required of them, and they know potentially what their future is or their lack of future in an organization. And that's really the fairest kind of conversation that you could have, even though they're hard. As a manager, you got to conduct transparent and regular one-on-ones. I mean, just you don't have people come in the office or get on the Zoom or Teams or whatever and go, oh yeah, hey, great, you're doing well, blah, blah, blah. Okay, great, thanks, bye. So make sure that as a manager, you are using that time wisely. And as a manager, I always tried to meet with everyone on my teams, even when I had big teams, at least, once every 2 weeks for at least 15 to 30 minutes, and just check in, make sure everything was going on, and people felt like there was care and feeding. And you have to do that. If you can't, and you have too big of a team, you need to potentially, make that team smaller, or put a manager underneath you, or move it to a manager that doesn't have as many people. But people require care and feeding, and then know when it's time to let go. And I think what we mean by this is, at some point, you just have to make a decision. It's time to fish or cut bait on this person. They're bringing down the team. They're not doing a great job. The team's getting demoralized because they're working hard, and this person is watching Netflix on their phone, in their cube. So that's the kind of stuff that you have to, as a manager, think about and watch out for.
And how many times have you seen? I know I've seen this. I think this goes, and you've touched on it. It's just as important for the employees to have this understanding, but also even sometimes training for the supervisor or managers. So back to my question is, how many times have you had a manager come to you in HR and it has so far gone that it is to the point where it's time to let go, where if it had been addressed with the frequency and consistency that you were just talking about, that person could have been saved, but by the time it comes to HR, then it's too late.
Well, a lot of times what happens is you have a manager who's poor at managing, and they're busy, and so they end up either not managing the situation at all, and then that makes it really far gone, and they just get fed up and they're like, I want this person out. They're fired right now. And you ask them, okay, well, what kind of documentation do you have? What kind of conversations have you had? You've never brought this up to me before. As the HR manager, you ask these questions and they don't have any information. That happens a lot. And then the other one is a manager who's really, really unsophisticated and tries to manage the situation themselves and ends up saying a bunch of really inappropriate things, where then the employee comes back and says, and do you know he said this, he said that, he said this, or she said that, and you're like, oh my gosh, did they really? So then you have a messy employee relations situation. So the whole thing is, if you follow the steps that we talked about as a manager, or as an employee, it's not going to get messy. And as an employee, you don't want it to get messy. And as a manager, perhaps, if you're struggling with this, go to your HR leader, or go to your manager, or your manager's manager, and say, hey, feel like maybe we don't have the kind of training that we need to do to take on this stuff. And so can you get us some help, give us some manager training? And so I think the more managers have training around how they handle these things, it's better for everyone. And look, at the end of the day, we want people to perform and do a good job. And hopefully, rather than spending your time doing PIPs, you're spending your time doing, development plans. So when I put this out on the LinkedIn, there were a lot of people that said, well, a development plan is really just a reverse PIP. It's the same thing. And so I said, well, that would really make me sad if we're thinking that a PIP and a development plan are the same thing. I mean, a development plan should really be started when, the employee's there and you're seeing things in the employee that are really valuable. Create a really valuable and appropriate development plan for them, where they can learn new things, get new skills, move forward, and make sure that they're getting the kind of coaching that they need to. And so I disagree with the premise that people were saying that it's the same thing. I think the earlier on in a person's career that you create a development plan for them and help them move through the process of what it takes at your company to get where you want to be, I think the more successful everyone will be. And especially your high potentials. I mean, if you have high potentials in your team, people that you think really highly of, you've got to have a development plan ready for them. That's just good for employee retention.
Well, and one of the best programs I was a part of, and I was working in HR in the manufacturing industry. We had a mentor program, and there were three of us in HR, and there were 9 supervisors. So we each took three supervisors, and each supervisor picked 3 top performers. And we met once a week for 3 months and did exactly that. We talked about where you're at now, where do you want to go, how can you get there, and mentored them up continually, so that they could even outperform how they were yesterday or the week before. And it was actually a very successful program. I thought it worked very well.
Yeah, that's so important. It really is, to be able to have those kind of conversations. And one of the things that we need to think about is there's all of this concern around AI. AI is going to take my job. AI is doing this, AI is doing that. And so one of the things that AI can't do as of right now is manage people, is to connect with people, is to have good people skills, and to know how to develop a team and coach a team and get them to move forward and have them follow the vision and the roadmap of whatever you're developing or doing or marketing or selling. And so the better you are at managing people and creating a team environment and creating an environment that people want to work and be engaged in, the more valuable you become to an organization, especially as AI gets more and more prevalent in organizations. So don't forget about this, which was once sort of maybe an afterthought by some companies of, we don't really need that, soft people stuff here. We're realizing that we do really need that here. And it's really important. And I think that's going to help differentiate people who stay in companies and are part of the move forward, especially as AI continues to dominate and potentially, take some work away.
So I'm curious, do you have and I'm surprising you with this, Jason. Do you have a success story or an experience that you can share on, how taking the right steps with an employee to avoid a PIP evolved into something very successful, or I guess even on the flip side, did not end well?
Well, I mean, there's been examples of people that were good that I've worked with over the years, and they were either in the wrong job, they were doing the wrong set of tasks, and we sat down with them and the manager and we examined what they were doing, and we realized we put them in a position to fail because we didn't do a good job of recognizing how to leverage their strengths. And so once we move those people out of that job and put them into something that they could be successful in, lots of people turned it around and had a very successful career, especially, when we didn't do the right thing and have them in the right place. So that happens pretty frequently. And that's another thing about good communication. If you're an employee, rather than thinking, I'm just going to gut this out, I'm going to make it work, I'm going to make it happen, you basically say, hey, look, I really should raise my hand here because this isn't really working and I need some help and I might be in the wrong job and maybe I should transition to something else in another department. Raise your hand and ask for help. Mm-hmm. And then the other thing is, there's a lot of people that have an immense sense of pride about what they're doing. And like, I'm not giving this up. I'm not getting off the ship. It's going to be like the Titanic. I'm going to go down with it. I'm going to make it happen. And my job, at different companies, especially when we had a progressive disciplinary process, and sometimes, we would approach a person with a PIP and we would say, here's a PIP, or we can offer you the severance package if you decline the PIP, and we'll give you some severance and you can walk away and cover your benefits for a little bit and you can get a head start on looking for a new job. And so a lot of times when you get to that point, management doesn't really want to be bothered by, and this is just being honest, management doesn't really want to be bothered by, having to performance manage somebody that they don't really see is going to be part of the long-term future of the organization. So you would work somewhat diligently. I don't want to make it sound more than that, but you would work somewhat diligently to try to get the person to take the package and say, hey, look, we love you, but your time is up. Your torch needs to be extinguished. And then you would, get them to take the PIP and they would move on. But yeah, I mean, there's lots of examples, both ways. And, but I would say the best example is just don't be on a PIP. Do some of these things that we're talking about to stay off of a PIP and be a good employee, be easy to manage, and have good communication with your manager and all these things. And, that'll make your life a lot happier, and that'll make your manager's life a lot happier.
Yeah. And I'm going to toot our horn just a little bit and say that, Jason and I meet every other week. And so we have the opportunity to talk about where we're at as a company, where we're at individually within the company, what we can continue doing great, what we might need to change. And it's great because it's a set aside time that it's not just off the cuff, but it's a set aside time for us to really talk. And I'll be honest, I have never had someone do that with me, and it's awesome because that this is a dedicated time. You're not getting half of their attention while you walk into an office or call them on Teams and they're doing something else. The people that are doing this and they're talking to you and looking somewhere else. They're not really listening to you, but it's a great opportunity where the both of us both take the time to hear each other. And so the one-on-ones, if it's not something you do, whether it's a line level employee that's a janitor or a C-level employee, this is applicable to across the board. Everyone needs that time to have that one-on-one, both as the manager and as the employee. I think.
So you never had one-on-ones with other managers?
You've had one-on-ones with?
So I said you've never really had one-on-ones with other managers?
Not like, no, it may have been off the cuff, on the side, spur of the moment, but never anything that was, and that speaks about me too as an employee, not putting that at the forefront, but never that was a dedicated time on the calendar. No.
Jeez. Wow. Well, Heather is cursing me now because I said to her, well, it'd really be fun to do these in person. And she's like, oh, I work from home now. He wants to meet in person once a week. So now she's like, oh my God, not only do I have to do this, but I have to meet with him. So,
Hey,
yeah, I kind of, what? Go ahead.
I get a coffee and maybe even a popsicle next time. So
yeah, exactly. Because I was like, hey, we're doing these, but I said we all work remotely for our company, and I was like, maybe we should start like meeting in person so that because we don't live that far from each other, so we feel like we're actually connected in a company. And since I started to do that, I've like really enjoyed it. I don't know about Heather; she's too nice to say whether she's bothered by it or not, but I thought it's been really beneficial for me.
I think just getting away and Zoom calls and team calls, I think are excellent and great. And you don't have to bring everyone back into the office. But I think that just forcing ourselves to walk out of the house and go meet someone face to face is quite refreshing. And I enjoy it. I'm looking forward
to it's crazy. Yeah, it's crazy. You're like, wow, I'm actually getting out. I'm having a coffee. I'm grabbing my backpack, putting my computer in it, and walking outside and the 110-degree heat, but it's all good.
As I peel myself from my fabric, even the fabric car seat, I'm peeling myself.
Yeah, exactly. Well, the interesting thing is there's been a number of articles that have came out this week, and I think it's all part of what we're talking about here as it relates to this conversation, and I'll throw this out, is that companies have now realized that younger employees, and this is targeted at younger employees, millennials, etc. And I'm not the one that's saying this. I'm just repeating what I've been reading. That they're now starting to do. 45% of companies have decided, and that number is moving up pretty quickly. Have decided they need to do soft skills training, and they need to do. They need to do. Oh my gosh, what is the word that they said? Just basic. Please and thank you and how to interact with people. Yeah, just like basic like social interaction skills. And so they're having to like put these classes in because what they're finding is based upon the pandemic and some of the other things, people no longer understand how to interact with each other, that they're really struggling with that. So these companies are now putting in these soft skills training because people just have lost the ability to be able to work together with others, which is
oh my gosh
crazy.
That is crazy. I guess.
Yeah, it really is. If you want to take a look at it, I haven't posted about it. I probably will. But my old boss, Holly Castro, who is the head of HR for Miro, she just posted about it, and you'll take a look at it. But there's a number of other articles that have been authored about this topic. But yeah, it's kind of the same thing. It's like we just have bad communication. We don't know how to talk to each other. We don't know how to interact with each other anymore. And it's something that we need to develop and get better at, or AI will really basically take over everything. If we've said like, hey, we give up on interacting with each other, okay, then just hire the AI to interact with each other. Because if we're not going to do it, I mean, that's the thing that differentiates us from the AI is being able to make decisions and to exist in an organization and work with each other and team with each other. And if we're not able to do that, that's a problem, at least in my mind.
No, I agree completely. It's a sad day that has come to that. But I guess when you evolve from experience of texting and emojis,
What's an emoji? No, I'm kidding. Yeah, exactly. I mean, like my daughter, it's so funny. Like I force her to do things on the phone or force her to talk to people, and you would think I'm like just the worst person in the world. Like on vacation, like, when you go stay at a hotel or wherever, you're like, you always need extra towels or you need something brought up to the room. Just like, Dad, we need this. And I'm like, okay, fine. Call down to the front desk. No, I go, well, I'm not doing it. So if you want clean towels, you will call down to the front desk and ask politely for clean towels, or you will ask politely for, whatever you need. And so she was like, oh my God. But by the end of the trip, she was jamming with it and she was fine. She's like, oh, we need this. I'm going to call down to the front desk. Oh, and so she was doing it. And, she's an outgoing kid to begin with. But I think when and we're going down a whole different rat hole, but but it's all kind of interconnected in my mind. When we just rely on texting and going to our phone to request stuff, and we can't call down to the front desk to ask for towels and all of that, it's like, this is why you go in a PIP, because you're not communicating with your manager, and you wind up in their office saying, hey, we haven't talked in a year, but your performance stinks and we want to fire you. I mean, it's somewhat all part of the same coin. You just need to get better at this stuff.
It is. And having those maybe even what might feel like an uncomfortable conversation. I mean, you mentioned that I was essentially not forced, but forced to have a difficult conversation with a client. This was years ago. And ended up being a fantastic conversation. It really was.
Yeah. And see what I mean? Like what I said earlier, conversations that we deem as hard or maybe in conflict typically are conversations that end up having the best upside at the end, because we really, what I always like to call bedrock. I mean, that's whatever the foundation of whatever relationship we have is on the bedrock. And once we get down to the bedrock and we realize what's propping us up, we can continue to build up once we know that bedrock is safe and sound and secure. But yeah, you're right. You hit the nail on the head.
Exactly.
Well, I think we've beaten the PIP to death on this conversation, I guess. Is there anything I've missed?
No, I think that we hit it. I think that, I take a look at it, reach out to us. If you are at a point where you're, as a company, you're struggling how to implement, facilitate, or manage, employee relations, we can help, and we can help you get to where you need to be.
And there's this amazing, oh boy, there's this amazing, oh my gosh, that'll be funny to look at the closed captioning on that word. There's this amazing confluence of things that are happening right now between what we just talked about with communication, what we talked about with soft skills, what we talked about with AI. All these things are just really coming together. And in my mind, they're really creating, and I don't want to go for a uncomfortable analogy, but they're really starting to create the tip of the spear where we can really see what's going on with companies and AI, and what's going to be valued in this new world of work. So we have just been inundated with requests to come and talk to companies about AI. And that is just a super hot topic right now. But, as you can see, it's sort of filtering through everything. So we'd love to, talk to you about AI and anything else that we can help you out with.
Yep, and you can see our emails are scrolling at the bottom. One that you'll see that is Ray, R-E-Y, at thrivehrconsulting.com is not with us. He is actually facilitating a HR M&A conference right now, but you'll see both my email and Jason's email at the bottom. I'm more than happy to reach out to any of us if you have any questions or want to discuss anything that you might need help with.
All right. Thanks so much, Heather. Thanks so much. We look forward to talking again next week. We'll see y'all then.
All right. Thanks.
Bye.